The clinking of crystal against crystal was a familiar symphony in our home. Champagne flutes, thin and delicate, chimed a celebratory note, a soundtrack to what I, Arthur, had always considered a life of enviable contentment. Isabella, my wife, moved with the effortless grace of a seasoned performer through our elegantly appointed living room. Her laughter, a melodic ripple, punctuated the hum of polite conversation. Tonight we were hosting a small gathering, a select group of friends and associates, a tableau of success and affluence. I watched Isabella, a vision in emerald green, as she effortlessly charmed a potential investor, her smile radiant, her eyes sparkling with an almost mischievous glint. I felt a surge of pride, a familiar warmth spreading through me. She was, after all, my Isabella. We had built this life together, brick by meticulously laid brick. My business, a venture I had nurtured from its fledgling stages to a thriving enterprise, afforded us the luxuries that now seemed so inextricably woven into the fabric of our existence. The sprawling house in the exclusive neighborhood, the curated art collection that adorned our walls, the annual sojourns to exotic locales, all testaments to our shared success. And Isabella, she was the perfect complement to it all. Beautiful, intelligent, and socially adept, she was the anchor to my sometimes turbulent professional life, a steady presence, a calming influence. Or so I had believed. The thought, unbidden and unwelcome, flickered at the edge of my consciousness, a shadow momentarily darkening the otherwise bright landscape of my contentment. It was a fleeting unease, a whisper of doubt that I had, until recently, managed to suppress with practiced ease. It had started subtly, a nagging feeling that something was off. Isabella's late-night phone calls, conducted in hushed tones in the hallway, her sudden and frequent girls' nights that stretched later and later into the evening, her almost distant demeanor. I had attributed it to stress, to the pressures of her own social engagements, to the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. But the whispers had grown louder, the unease more persistent. I watched as Isabella glided towards me, her smile softening as she approached. "Darling," she murmured, her hand lightly resting on my arm. "Mr. Henderson seems quite taken with the new Merlot. He's very interested in discussing a potential partnership." Her touch, once a source of comfort, now felt different. I couldn't quite place it, but the familiar warmth was absent, replaced by a strange chill. "Excellent," I replied, forcing a smile that felt strained, unnatural. "I'll speak with him in a moment." As she moved away, her laughter mingling once again with the other conversations in the room, I found my gaze drawn to her. I studied her movements, the way she interacted with the other guests, her easy laughter, her casual touches. And the unease solidified, crystallizing into a hard, cold knot in the pit of my stomach. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were screams. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that my life, the life I had so carefully constructed, was about to unravel. The party continued. A surreal charade played out against the backdrop of our meticulously curated life. I moved through the crowd, a phantom at my own gathering, my smile a carefully crafted mask concealing the turmoil within. I engaged in conversations, nodding and responding appropriately, but my mind was a whirlwind of suspicion and growing dread. I watched Isabella, my gaze following her every move, dissecting every interaction, searching for a clue, a tell, anything that would confirm the gnawing suspicion that had taken root in my soul. She seemed lighter, somehow more carefree than she had been in recent months. Her laughter, once a source of comfort, now grated on my ears, a discordant note in the symphony of my unraveling world. The image of her with another man, a fleeting glimpse caught in the periphery of my vision weeks prior, flashed through my mind. I had dismissed it then, attributing it to the overactive imagination of a tired mind. But now, that image returned with renewed clarity, a stark and undeniable truth. It was a seed of doubt that had been planted, and now it was beginning to sprout, its tendrils wrapping around my heart, squeezing the air from my lungs. I needed to know. I had to know. The other guests, oblivious to the drama unfolding beneath the surface of polite conversation, continued to enjoy themselves. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversations, the soft strains of music, all a stark contrast to the storm raging within me. I felt like an imposter in my own life, a spectator watching a play unfold, a play in which I was both the protagonist and the victim. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself standing beside Isabella as we bid farewell to our departing guests. She leaned in, her lips brushing against my cheek in a perfunctory kiss. "Thank you, darling," she murmured, her voice soft and intimate. It was a wonderful evening. Her touch, once a source of comfort and connection, now felt like a brand, a mark of betrayal. I forced a smile, the muscles in my face aching with the effort. "Indeed," I replied, my voice flat, devoid of the warmth it usually held. Once the last guest had departed, and the silence of the late hour descended upon our home, I retreated to my study. I poured myself a glass of scotch, the amber liquid a temporary solace against the darkness that was creeping into my soul. I sat in the leather armchair, the familiar surroundings now feeling alien, tainted by the growing certainty of Isabella's betrayal. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't ignore the whispers any longer. I had to confront them, to face the truth, however painful it might be. But I also knew that I couldn't do it impulsively, in the heat of the moment. I needed a plan. I needed to understand the full extent of her deception. And I needed to decide what I was going to do about it. The thought of confronting Isabella directly, of engaging in a dramatic confrontation, flashed through my mind. But I dismissed it almost as quickly as it arose. That was not my style. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a scene, of witnessing my pain. No, my revenge, if that was what it was to be, would be far more subtle, far more calculated. It would be a slow, deliberate unraveling of her world, a dismantling of the life she had so carefully constructed. And it would begin with a single phone call. The phone call was brief, a simple exchange of pleasantries and a request for a meeting. The recipient, an old acquaintance from my university days, a man named Alex, had taken a rather unconventional career path. He was a private investigator, a discreet and highly effective one, if the rumors were to be believed. I hadn't spoken to him in years, our paths diverging significantly after graduation, but I had kept track of his career, a morbid curiosity perhaps, or maybe a premonition of a future need. And now that need had arisen. We met the following day at a quiet cafe, a nondescript establishment tucked away in a side street, far from the prying eyes of our social circle. Alex, a man of few words and sharp observations, listened intently as I laid out my suspicions, the gnawing doubts, the subtle changes in Isabella's behavior. He didn't interrupt, his expression unreadable, his eyes betraying nothing but a professional interest. When I had finished, he sat back, his gaze fixed on some distant point in the cafe. "Arthur," he finally said, his voice low and measured, "these are serious accusations. Are you sure you want to go down this road?" I hesitated, the weight of his words settling heavily upon me. Was I sure? A part of me, a small, desperate part, still clung to the hope that I was wrong, that my suspicions were unfounded, that Isabella was still the woman I thought she was. But the evidence, however circumstantial, was mounting. The late-night calls, the unexplained absences, the distant demeanor. They all pointed to a truth I could no longer ignore. "Yes," I replied, my voice firm, resolute. "I need to know." Alex nodded, his expression hardening. "Very well," he said. "I'll need some information. Her schedule, her contacts. Any details you can think of that might be relevant." I spent the next hour providing him with everything I could recall, every detail, every observation, every fleeting suspicion. As I spoke, the reality of the situation sank in, the truth of Isabella's betrayal becoming more and more apparent. The pain was a dull ache in my chest, a constant reminder of the life that was slipping away from me. When I had finished, Alex stood up. "I'll be in touch," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Don't contact me unless it's absolutely necessary. I'll let you know what I find." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts, my fears, and the growing certainty that my world was about to crumble. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I went through the motions of my life, attending meetings, making decisions, maintaining the facade of normalcy, while inside, I was a tightly wound coil of tension, waiting for the phone call that would either confirm my worst fears or, perhaps, offer a glimmer of hope. But deep down, I knew what the answer would be. I knew that the Isabella the first thought I knew, the woman I had loved and trusted, was gone. And in her place was a stranger, a woman whose secrets and deceptions were about to be laid bare. The call came a week later, just as I was about to leave for a business dinner. Alex's voice, devoid of inflection, cut through the polite chatter of the restaurant, sending a chill down my spine. "Meet me," he said, and then provided an address, a nondescript office building in a quiet part of town. I excused myself from the dinner, feigning a sudden illness, and made my way to the address Alex had given me. His office was sparse, functional, devoid of any personal touches. Alex sat behind a steel desk, a manila envelope lying in front of him. He gestured for me to sit down, and then, without a word, slid the envelope across the desk. I took it, my hands trembling slightly, and opened it. Inside were photographs, grainy images captured by a hidden camera, images that confirmed my worst fears. Isabella, my Isabella, was having an affair, and not just one. The photographs documented a series of encounters, each one a betrayal more profound than the last. There she was, in the arms of another man, her lips locked in a passionate kiss, her body pressed against his. There she was again, in a dimly lit restaurant, her hand intertwined with that of a different man, her laughter echoing through the room. And there she was yet again, entering a hotel room with a man I recognized as a business associate, a man I had considered a friend. The images blurred before my eyes, a kaleidoscope of infidelity, a testament to the depth of her deception. I closed the envelope, my stomach churning, my mind reeling. The pain was a physical sensation now, a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. I looked up at Alex, my voice barely a whisper. "Who are they?" Alex, his expression unchanged, began to lay out the details. The first man, the one in the passionate embrace, was a renowned artist, a man known for his charm and his libertine lifestyle. The second, the one in the restaurant, was a close friend of ours, a man I had trusted implicitly. And the third, the business associate, was a man whose loyalty I had never questioned. Each revelation was a blow, a hammer striking at the foundation of my life, shattering the illusion of happiness I had so carefully constructed. But there was more. As Alex continued, the full extent of Isabella's betrayal became clear. It wasn't just a single affair, a moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment. It was a pattern of deceit, a web of lies that she had woven around me, a betrayal that went far deeper than I could have ever imagined. She had been seeing these men, and others, for months, perhaps even years. She had been living a double life, a life of secrets and lies, while I, oblivious, had continued to play the role of the devoted husband. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with my life, was a stranger. She had betrayed me in the most profound way imaginable, shattering the very foundation of our relationship. And as the shock wore off, a cold, hard anger began to rise within me. It wasn't the kind of anger that explodes in a fit of rage, but a slow, simmering anger, an anger that promised retribution. I would not let her get away with this. I would not let her destroy me. I would have my revenge. Leaving Alex's office, I stepped out into the night, the city lights blurring into an indistinct kaleidoscope of color. The air was thick with the scent of rain, a dampness that seemed to seep into my bones, mirroring the chill that had settled deep within me. I felt detached, as if observing the world from a distance, the bustling city life a mere backdrop to the drama unfolding within my own mind. The initial shock of the photographs had given way to a numbing sense of betrayal. Each image, each revelation, was a knife twisting in my gut, a constant reminder of Isabella's deceit. But amidst the pain, a new emotion was taking root, a cold, calculating anger that promised retribution. I wouldn't allow myself to be consumed by grief or self-pity. I wouldn't give Isabella the satisfaction of seeing me broken. No, I would channel my pain, my anger, into something more productive, something more destructive. I wouldn't confront her, not yet. That would be too easy, too predictable. I wanted her to suffer, to experience the same slow, agonizing unraveling that I was enduring. I wanted her to understand the consequences of her actions, to feel the full weight of her betrayal. And I knew just how to do it. I wouldn't resort to violence, to physical retribution. That was beneath me, a crude and ultimately unsatisfying solution. My revenge would be far more sophisticated, far more insidious. I would use my knowledge, my resources, my connections, to dismantle her world, piece by piece. I would expose her lies, her infidelity, to those she cared about most. I would ruin her reputation, her social standing, her carefully crafted image. I would strip her of everything she held dear, leaving her with nothing but the ashes of her deceit. The plan began to take shape in my mind, a complex and intricate web of manipulation and deceit. I would start with her lovers, those men who had so carelessly betrayed my trust. I would use their own weaknesses against them, their secrets, their vulnerabilities, their ambitions. I would turn them against each other, sow discord and distrust, and watch as their lives unraveled. And then, when they were at their most vulnerable, I would strike, exposing their infidelity to the world, ruining their reputations, their careers, their lives. And Isabella, she would be the final piece of the puzzle. I would save her for last, letting her watch as her world crumbled around her, as her lovers fell one by one, as her friends and family turned their backs on her. And then, when she was completely alone, stripped of everything she held dear, I would reveal my knowledge of her betrayal, my calculated revenge. I would leave her with nothing, a hollow shell of the woman she once was, a testament to the destructive power of deceit. The rain began to fall, a gentle drizzle at first, then a steady downpour. I walked on, oblivious to the weather, my mind consumed by my plans. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement, creating a shimmering illusion, a mirage of beauty that masked the darkness beneath. And as I walked, I felt a sense of purpose, a grim satisfaction in the knowledge that I was in control. Isabella had made her choices, and now she would pay the price. The first step was information. I needed to know more about Isabella's lovers, their weaknesses, their secrets, the cracks in their carefully constructed facades. I began subtly, observing their interactions with Isabella, listening to their conversations, noting their habits and routines. I used my business connections to gather information about their professional lives, their financial dealings, their personal relationships. And I delved into their social media presence, those curated online personas that often hid a multitude of sins. The artist Julian was the easiest target. His reputation as a womanizer preceded him. His social media feeds a testament to his hedonistic lifestyle. He was arrogant, vain, and deeply insecure, his artistic talent a fragile shield against his own self-doubt. I learned of his financial struggles, his dependence on wealthy patrons, his fear of being exposed as a fraud. The close friend, Mark, was a different story. He was a respected businessman, a pillar of the community, a man whose reputation was impeccable. But beneath the surface of respectability, I discovered a man riddled with anxieties, a man desperate to maintain his image of success, a man terrified of failure. I learned of his secret gambling addiction, his mounting debts, his strained relationship with his wife. The business associate, William, was the most challenging. He was a shrewd and calculating man, a master of deception. But even he had his weaknesses. I discovered his illicit affair with a junior colleague, his questionable business practices, his carefully hidden resentment of my success. As I gathered information, a plan began to take shape, a complex and intricate scheme designed to exploit their vulnerabilities, to turn their own secrets against them. I would use their ambitions, their fears, their desires to manipulate them, to set them on a collision course with their own destruction. And Isabella, She would be at the center of it all, the catalyst for their downfall, the unwitting instrument of my revenge. I continued to play the role of the devoted husband, attending social events with Isabella, maintaining the facade of normalcy. But behind the mask of contentment, I was a man on a mission, a man driven by a cold, calculating anger. I watched Isabella, observing her interactions with her lovers, noting the subtle changes in her behavior, the growing confidence, the careless disregard for my feelings. And with each passing day, my resolve hardened, my determination to make her pay intensified. The stage was set, the players in place. The game had begun, and I, the puppet master, was ready to pull the strings. Julian, the artist, was the first to fall. I began by subtly feeding his ego, praising his work, introducing him to influential art collectors. He lapped it up, his vanity blinding him to my true intentions. I then planted seeds of doubt about his financial situation, hinting at potential problems with his patrons, suggesting that his career was on the verge of collapse. His insecurity, always simmering beneath the surface, flared up, his confidence crumbling. I then introduced him to a wealthy investor, a man with a reputation for ruthlessness and a penchant for risky ventures. Julian, desperate to secure his financial future, jumped at the opportunity, unaware that the investor was a pawn in my game. The investment turned out to be a disaster, a carefully orchestrated scheme that left Julian bankrupt and disgraced. His reputation, already tarnished by his womanizing ways, was now in tatters. He was ostracized by the art world, his career in ruins. Isabella, oblivious to my machinations, was initially sympathetic to Julian's plight. But as the scandal unfolded, as the details of his financial mismanagement and his numerous affairs came to light, her sympathy turned to disgust. She distanced herself from him, fearing that his notoriety would tarnish her own reputation. Julian, abandoned by his lover and his patrons, spiraled into despair, his life a testament to the destructive power of vanity and greed. I watched his downfall with a cold satisfaction, a sense of justice served. He had betrayed my trust, violated my home, and now he was paying the price. But this was just the beginning. Julian was merely the first domino to fall, the first casualty in my carefully orchestrated campaign of revenge. There were others to follow, each one a pawn in my game, each one destined to suffer the consequences of their betrayal. And Isabella, she would be the last to fall, the final victim in my elaborate scheme. I would watch as her world crumbled around her, as her lovers were exposed, as her friends and family turned their backs on her. And then, when she was completely alone, stripped of everything she held dear, I would reveal my knowledge of her betrayal, my calculated revenge. I would leave her with nothing, a hollow shell of the woman she once was, a testament to the destructive power of deceit. Mark, the close friend, was a more delicate operation. His public image was pristine, his reputation built on years of carefully cultivated respectability. A direct attack would be risky, potentially drawing unwanted attention to my own involvement. Instead, I opted for a more subtle approach, a slow and insidious erosion of his carefully constructed facade. I began by subtly feeding his gambling addiction, introducing him to high-stakes poker games, arranging for him to win initially, fueling his desire for risk and reward. As his wins mounted, so did his confidence, his sense of invincibility. He became reckless, betting larger and larger sums, oblivious to the trap I was setting. At the same time, I began to sow seeds of doubt about his business dealings, anonymously leaking information about questionable investments, hinting at potential financial irregularities. The rumors spread like wildfire, his business partners and investors growing wary. His carefully constructed image of success began to crumble, his reputation tarnished by whispers of impropriety. As his financial situation deteriorated, his gambling losses mounting, his marriage began to strain under the pressure. His wife, once a loyal and supportive partner, grew suspicious of his late-night activities, his unexplained absences, his growing desperation. Arguments ensued, trust eroded, their relationship fracturing under the weight of his deceit. The final blow came when I anonymously tipped off the authorities about his gambling debts and his questionable business practices. An investigation was launched, his assets frozen, his reputation irreparably damaged. He was forced to resign from his company, his career in ruins, his marriage on the verge of collapse. Isabella, initially shocked by Mark's downfall, soon distanced herself from him, fearing that his scandal would taint her own social standing. She offered no support, no comfort, only a cold and calculated rejection. Mark, abandoned by his lover and his friends, his life in shambles, was left to face the consequences of his actions alone. I watched his demise with a grim satisfaction, a sense of poetic justice. He had betrayed my trust, violated my friendship, and now he was paying the price. His downfall was a testament to the corrosive power of addiction and deceit, a warning to those who would dare to cross me. And Isabella, she was witnessing the consequences of her actions, the slow and agonizing destruction of those who had dared to share her secrets. William, the business associate, proved to be the most challenging adversary. He was cunning, resourceful, and adept at concealing his tracks. But I knew he had weaknesses, vulnerabilities that I could exploit. His ambition, his greed, his carefully hidden insecurities. These were the tools I would use to bring him down. I began by subtly undermining his position within the company, planting seeds of doubt about his loyalty, his competence, his commitment to the firm. I leaked information about his illicit affair with a junior colleague, fueling rumors of impropriety and abuse of power. His colleagues, once trusting and supportive, grew wary, their respect replaced by suspicion and distrust. At the same time, I began to investigate his business dealings, uncovering a pattern of questionable investments, shady partnerships, and potential legal violations. I anonymously forwarded this information to the relevant authorities, initiating a discreet investigation into his activities. The pressure mounted, his carefully constructed facade of respectability beginning to crack. His affair with the junior colleague became public knowledge, further damaging his reputation and jeopardizing his position within the company. His wife, once oblivious to his infidelity, filed for divorce, taking with her a substantial portion of his assets. His carefully curated life, built on a foundation of lies and deceit, began to unravel. The final blow came when the authorities, armed with the information I had provided, launched a full-scale investigation into his business practices. He was accused of fraud, embezzlement, and insider trading. His assets were frozen, his reputation destroyed, his career in ruins. He was left with nothing but the consequences of his actions, a testament to the destructive power of ambition and greed. Isabella, initially dismissive of the rumors surrounding William, soon realized the gravity of the situation. She distanced herself from him, fearing that his scandal would taint her own social standing. She offered no support, no comfort, only a cold and calculated rejection. William, abandoned by his lover and his colleagues, his life in shambles, was left to face the consequences of his actions alone. With each fallen lover, Isabella's world grew smaller, her support network dwindling. She was becoming isolated, her carefully crafted image tarnished by association with scandal and deceit. And I, the architect of her downfall, watched with a grim satisfaction, knowing that the final act of my revenge was drawing near. While the intricate web of my revenge ensnared Isabella's lovers, I maintained a meticulous facade of normalcy. To the outside world, and most importantly to Isabella, I was the same devoted husband, the supportive partner, the pillar of stability. I attended social events with her, my arm linked with hers, a picture of marital bliss. I engaged in polite conversations with our friends, feigning ignorance of the whispers and rumors that swirled around us. Isabella, blinded by her own desires and deceptions, remained oblivious to the storm brewing around her. She reveled in the attention of her lovers, unaware that they were pawns in my game, their lives slowly unraveling under my carefully orchestrated manipulations. She saw my continued devotion as a sign of her own power, her ability to control and manipulate me. Her confidence grew, her arrogance bordering on recklessness. I watched her with a mixture of disgust and pity. She was like a child playing with fire, unaware of the danger, the potential for destruction. Her laughter grated on my nerves. Her touch sent shivers of revulsion down my spine. But I maintained my composure, my mask firmly in place. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing my pain, my anger. I would let her continue in her delusion, her world slowly crumbling around her, until the final, devastating blow. Our social circle, once a source of comfort and support, became a stage for my subtle manipulations. I planted seeds of doubt about Isabella's character, hinting at her infidelity, her manipulative nature, her disregard for others. I watched as friendships strained, trust eroded, and alliances shifted. Isabella, once the queen bee of our social set, found herself increasingly isolated, her circle of friends shrinking, her influence waning. She attributed this shift to jealousy, to the envy of those who coveted her life, her beauty, her success. She remained blind to her own role in her downfall, her arrogance preventing her from seeing the truth. And I, the architect of her demise, watched with a cold satisfaction, knowing that the final act of my revenge was drawing near. The stage was set, the players in place. The net was closing in, and Isabella, the unsuspecting prey, was about to be ensnared. The time had come to shift my focus directly onto Isabella. Her lovers were ruined, their lives shattered, their reputations in tatters. Her social circle had dwindled, her friends and acquaintances distancing themselves from the taint of scandal. She was alone, vulnerable, ripe for the final blow. I began subtly, planting seeds of doubt in her mind, creating a sense of unease and paranoia. I would leave ambiguous messages on her phone, send anonymous emails hinting at her infidelity, arrange for her to overhear whispered conversations about her affairs. She grew increasingly suspicious of those around her, her trust eroded, her confidence shaken. I manipulated situations to further isolate her, creating misunderstandings between her and her remaining friends, fueling arguments and disagreements. I exploited her insecurities, her fears, her vulnerabilities, turning her own emotions against her. She became withdrawn, her laughter silenced, her vibrant personality replaced by a brooding anxiety. The once radiant Isabella was now a shadow of her former self, haunted by guilt, fear, and suspicion. Her carefully constructed world, built on a foundation of lies and deceit, was crumbling around her. She was trapped in a web of her own making, her every move watched, her every thought scrutinized. I watched her unraveling with a cold detachment, a sense of grim satisfaction. The woman who had once held my heart, the woman I had loved and trusted, was now a stranger, a hollow shell of her former self. Her beauty had faded, replaced by a haggard weariness. Her laughter, once a source of joy, was now a distant memory. The time was almost ripe for the final act, the culmination of my carefully orchestrated revenge. I would expose her infidelity to the world, stripping her of her reputation, her social standing, her carefully crafted image. I would leave her with nothing, a pariah, a testament to the destructive power of deceit. And then, when she was at her lowest point, I would reveal my knowledge of her betrayal, my calculated revenge. I would leave her with the bitter taste of defeat, the realization that she had been outmaneuvered, outwitted, and ultimately destroyed. The stage was set for the final act of my revenge. Isabella, isolated and vulnerable, was ripe for the fall. I had meticulously planned this moment, orchestrating every detail to ensure maximum impact, maximum humiliation. I chose the annual charity gala, a high-profile event attended by the crème de la crème of our social circle, as the venue for my exposé. It was the perfect setting, a public spectacle that would ensure Isabella's downfall was witnessed by all those who had once admired and envied her. I arrived at the gala with Isabella on my arm, a picture of marital bliss. She was a vision in red, a stunning gown that belied the turmoil within. Her smile was strained, her eyes betraying a flicker of anxiety, but she played her part well, greeting our acquaintances with practiced grace. I watched her, a predator savoring the anticipation of the kill. As the evening progressed, I subtly steered conversations, dropping hints about Isabella's infidelity, fueling the rumors that had been circulating for weeks. I watched as whispers spread through the crowd, eyes turning towards Isabella with a mixture of curiosity and condemnation. Her smile faltered, her confidence waning under the weight of scrutiny. The climax came during the charity auction, a highlight of the evening. I had arranged for a special item to be included in the auction, a seemingly innocuous piece of jewelry, a diamond necklace. But this was no ordinary necklace. It was the one I had gifted Isabella on our anniversary, the one she had been wearing during her clandestine encounters with her lovers. As the auctioneer presented the necklace, I stood up, my voice ringing through the hushed ballroom. "I believe this necklace belongs to my wife," I announced, my gaze fixed on Isabella. "Perhaps one of her companions would like to place a bid?" The silence was deafening. All eyes turned to Isabella, her face pale, her body trembling. The truth was out, her infidelity exposed in the most public and humiliating way possible. Gasps of shock and whispers of condemnation filled the room. Isabella, stripped of her dignity, her reputation in tatters, fled the ballroom, her cries echoing through the stunned silence. The gala descended into chaos, the carefully orchestrated facade of social decorum shattered. The guests, once eager to bask in Isabella's reflected glory, now distanced themselves from her, their whispers turning to accusations, their admiration replaced by contempt. Isabella, once the queen of our social circle, was now a pariah, an outcast, a symbol of betrayal and deceit. The gala was a disaster, a spectacle of humiliation and disgrace. Isabella, once the center of attention, was now an outcast, her reputation shattered, her life in ruins. She fled the event, her cries echoing through the stunned silence, her heart heavy with shame and regret. The following day, the news spread like wildfire. Her infidelity splashed across the front pages of the newspapers, her name a subject of gossip and condemnation. Her friends and acquaintances, once eager to bask in her reflected glory, now turned their backs on her, their whispers of admiration replaced by accusations of betrayal and deceit. Isabella, isolated and alone, faced the consequences of her actions. Her career was over, her social standing destroyed, her life in tatters. She was a pariah, a symbol of the destructive power of infidelity, a warning to all women who dared to stray from the path of marital fidelity. I watched her downfall with a cold satisfaction, a sense of justice served. She had betrayed my trust, violated my marriage, and now she was paying the price. Her humiliation, her isolation, her shattered life, these were the consequences of her actions, a testament to the destructive power of deceit. And yet, even as I savored my victory, a sense of emptiness gnawed at me. The revenge I had sought, the retribution I had craved, had not brought me the satisfaction I had expected. Instead, it had left me with a hollow feeling, a sense of emptiness that I could not shake off. I had become a different man, a man capable of great cruelty, a man driven by a thirst for revenge that had consumed my soul. I had sacrificed my own happiness, my own reputation, for the sake of this twisted vendetta. And now, as I stood at the precipice of my victory, I realized that I had lost more than I had gained. I had lost my innocence, my trust, my faith in humanity. I had become a stranger to myself, a man driven by dark impulses, a man capable of great cruelty. And as I looked at the woman I had once loved, now a broken shell of her former self, I realized that I had not only destroyed her life, but also my own. The revenge I had sought had not brought me peace, only a hollow victory, a reminder of the destructive power of hatred and resentment. I had become a victim of my own anger, a prisoner of my own revenge. And as I stood there, staring at the ruins of my life, I knew that I would never be the same again.